Kevin, I'm so glad you're able to join me today. Really looking forward to having this conversation, perhaps continuing conversations we've had in the past. One of my favorite things is that you are the L&D Detective, and immediately I know what that is. It is what it is. I have this title, I have the word evangelist in my job title, and then I have to spend 20 minutes explaining what it is that I do. What I like about you and your title is right to the point. We know what you're doing. We're getting to the bottom of things. And so hopefully today we can get to the bottom of some of these things. What do you think?
I like that you know what I do just based on the title. And so I hope that that resonates with everybody, right? And I got to tell you, David, I didn't think of that on my own, right? That name, that title, the L&D Detective, really came to me as a result of conversations with the global L&D community. And it's an analogy for the work that I do because, like Sherlock Holmes was investigating murder mysteries, I investigate measurement mysteries. So therein lies the name L&D Detective.
It's perfect. And, it is almost a shame, but I guess it's a good place to start that it is such a mystery, right? Because that's part of the issue with it is that it shouldn't be, but it is. And, like I said, we've had conversations in the past in person, and this keeps coming up. And, I've been an industry analyst for probably 15 plus years before coming to Skooks. And in that 15 years, this has been the number one issue, if not at least top two, every single year, and we talk about it all the time. Why is it that companies just struggle so much with this idea of figuring out whether or not all of the time and energy and passion that they put into what they're doing is doing anything? Why is that such a struggle?
Because the truth is, it's difficult work, right? Measuring the impact of training and learning, investigating the extent to which training and learning measurably contributes to human and business performance, and searching for the facts, the clues, and the evidence and the data that connects the dots between a training and a learning solution and outcomes for behavior, actions, performance, and ultimately business goals. It's not easy, man. And the truth is that measuring the impact of training and learning, the way in which I described it, meaning measuring how it impacts human and business performance, it's not easy work, but it's possible work. And we've been struggling and wrestling with it for as long as I've been in the industry, and I don't want to tell you how many years that is. But you're right, man. It's been something that we have been grappling and wrestling with for years. I think we've become better at it for certain and for sure, but there is still a little bit of struggle there. But I also want to share that we've had some successes, right? I think that the mindset is changing, the methodologies are changing, the focus is changing. Where we're not so focused on calling results from a survey impact. We're really now focused on trying to figure out at the end of the day, when people are back at the ranch, back at the office, did a training or learning experience measurably contribute or influence the way in which they're working, the way in which they're thinking, the way in which they're acting, and then ultimately for how they're working, behaving, and acting, is that measurably contributing to business performance and business outcomes? So, in summary, David, yeah, we're struggling, man. It's hard work. It's difficult work, but it is also work that is possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so it's interesting that you brought that up because I feel like the topics that I like to cover on this podcast, whatever it may be, the term hard work almost always comes up, right? All these important things for L&D, I think it is hard work. You're right, but it's hard work that's worth doing, and it can be done. As you said, it's possible. But let's also think of it this way too. It's the vast majority of L&D professionals that are out there that are struggling with this. It's not as though they're adverse to hard work. They're currently doing hard work, right? To me, I feel like this is one of those things where if you can find the wherewithal, the ability, the time, the energy to do some of this hard work, the long term payoff is immeasurable, and actually makes a lot of the other hard work you're already doing easier. I think. You've read one of those connections. Would you agree with that?
It can, right? And in addition to all those things that you just talked about in terms of what it takes, right? It said it takes hard work. Um, it takes a little bit of elbow grease. It takes some effort. It also takes discipline. It takes commitment and it takes structure. right? So when we have a structure in place that is a proven methodology for measuring how training learning contributes to human and business performance, it gets a little easier if we do the work up front that sets us up for success to measure the impact of training and learning, then we are more likely to be able to actually produce the evidence and the data that shows how training and learning is measurably impacting people's performance and ultimately business outcomes. I think that one of the reasons, David, that we struggle with it and why we aren't as successful is because we don't do the work up front. And what happens a lot, more often than it should, is that we create our training program, we create our learning experience, and we do a great job with instructional design and all that. We set it up, we invite people, they come, they attend, they consume our training and learning solutions. But we didn't plan proactively for how that training experience or that learning experience is going to contribute to people's performance. That's intentional, man. We got to be very specific and intentional about that up front. We got to be purposeful about that up front. And again, I don't repeat myself, but I have been placed in positions where, the training program is already launched and used, and then I'm brought in to measure the impact. And then my follow-up question is, well, what was the intended impact? Because if you can tell me that, I can chase after it. But if you don't know what it is, it's just going to be hard to prove. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always seen as this. And I think I've said this before too. That measurement always is spoken of and seen as this endpoint, right? They think of the whole process as linear. Like I know what I need to do, and we're going to do this, this, and this, and then at the end, we're going to measure it, and that's just it's too late, far too late. And I think, yeah, and one of the interesting things, like, and I sometimes say this, and I feel like I might get pushback or upset L&D leaders, but there's this almost hubris in L&D where you mentioned all the great hard work and super excellent instructional designers and people putting all this stuff together. 100%. I don't disagree. I meet some amazingly talented people when I go to different conferences and have these discussions. But there seems to be this thing that, yes, we are very good at what we do and we're super talented. So by definition, the things that we create are good and work. So there's almost this no need to follow up. It's like what I've created is this perfect thing, and as long as I can convince people to take it and finish it, the job is done. Do you think there's any of that going on, or am I being too harsh?
I don't think that you're being too harsh, David. I think that there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I think that the greatest opportunity that we have as a profession is to just be more intentional, more specific, and more purposeful with why we do what we do. So, my perspective, my belief is that training and learning fulfill the highest purpose with measurable impact on human and business performance. Now, there are training and learning solutions that are created for other purposes, and that's okay. That's fine. For example, there are times where we create training and learning for compliance, where we need to demonstrate that we have met some type of regulatory, you know, what's the word? I'm losing the word. But like, we have to produce something that says our people did this, right? Some type of regulation. So that may not necessarily be a time where training is produced to create measurable outcomes for human and business performance. But for me, training and learning fulfills the highest purpose with measurable influence and contribution to human and business performance. So if we keep that top of mind and we design for impact that way, if we plan for impact, if we already know what metrics, measures, and key performance indicators we're going to use to determine whether or not training and learning fulfilled that highest purpose, that's when it gets easier. So when we have that kind of focus, that kind of mindset, and that kind of methodology, we're going to be in a much better position to produce the facts, the evidence, and the data that shows how training and learning did what it was supposed to do.
Yeah. Although I would take one slight issue, and it's not necessarily a disagreement with you, but what I would argue is that even compliance training, even the most seemingly mundane bit of compliance training, yes, the point of it is to make sure that you've checked the box and we're in compliance. There is a business reason that exists. Even if it's a regulation, that regulation is designed to keep someone safe, to protect finances, whatever it is. There is this business reason. Now, should that be the first thing that you pour all your measurement resources into? Maybe not. But I think once you get good at this stuff, then even the smallest thing like a compliance training has some business reason that you can then present and get people to be more engaged in doing that rather than just saying, do this or else. Because a lot of times, even outside of compliance, when you're unable to make these connections that you're describing, a lot of learning training feels like do this or else, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. I think we're kind of saying the same thing here. So, again, I think about the different purposes for which training and learning fulfill, right? And, again, my idea is that the highest purpose is measurable impact on human and business performance. And to your point, David, there are some training and learning solutions and experiences that fulfill other types of business specific purposes, right? So I just say measure for purpose fulfilled, whatever that purpose is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the purpose is never that the learning was done, right? There's this sort of snake eating its own tail of just this is all we're doing is, um, pushing out the cycle. So, what are in your work? Obviously, you try to help organizations and professionals think through these things, and I find it the work that you do, like you offer people an opportunity to sort of stop, catch your breath, lift your head up, right? Because that's the biggest challenge. Is everyone's got every day. I got to do this. I got to get this done. This fire over here. This fire over there. So you give people an opportunity. Let's just take a break. Let's lift our head up. What are some of like the key mistakes, other than just philosophically, like we've been talking, like you're not putting the right uh, focus in some of these areas. But what are some of the mistakes that you find that organizations have made, continue to make when it comes to measuring impact?
I'm probably going to sound like a broken record here, but I believe, and my experience tells me this, my 30 plus years of experience tells me that the area where we struggle the most is proactive planning, right? I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but man, David, it is so prevalent in the organizations in which I've worked, the clients in which I serve and help with their impact measurement strategies. The gap, the consistent gap, is not planning in advance for how you're going to measure the impact of training and learning. It's always an afterthought because there's so much energy, effort, and focus on designing and creation and not as much focus on planning for how we're going to evaluate results, right? And that has to be a discussion that happens first. That has to be a discussion that happens even before there are discussions about instructional design. We need to have clarity around where we want to influence and impact and contribute to human and business performance. We want to get very clear about that. We want to determine the extent to which training and learning can actually do what we think it can do, right? There has to be some real thought about that because we may have some thoughts and ideas that training and learning is a silver bullet, or that we have magic wands of pixie dust as training, learning, and talent development professionals, and that we can fix any and everything. None of that is true. So we got to be very clear about it up front about what we can do with training and learning, what we can't do. A lot of measurement efforts fail because we can't measure what we're trying to measure, and we didn't figure that out up front, right? And that's why they fail. So where I see the greatest opportunity is to just be so much more intentional and proactive and truthful and honest up front about what we can and cannot measure. And for what we can measure, let's chase after that. And for what we cannot measure, let's stop chasing after that because that's a waste of time, energy, effort, and resources. So I think, as cliche as it sounds, David, the truth will set you free, man. And if we tell the truth about what we can and cannot measure, we're going to have so many more successful stories about how we were able to measure the impact of training and learning.
Yeah. Do you think that some professionals are afraid of the truth? And this
Um,
is leading to it. Like maybe you don't want to
yeah,
know
yeah.
what the impact or isn't.
I wouldn't say afraid of the truth. I think that a lot of our thoughts and ideas are deeply rooted in history, tradition, and aspiration. And I think aspiration in its proper context is good, right? But I think that we got to kind of let go of some of these things that we used to believe as it relates to measuring impact and really embrace the truth. And the truth is, measuring the impact of training and learning on human and business performance is difficult and possible. And in addition to that, what makes it more possible and less difficult is when we proactively plan for measurement and when we designed with impact in mind. So it's not just about creating a training or an e-learning, it's about creating a learning experience or a training experience that has the potential and the power to trigger and activate human and business performance. Does that make sense?
Mhm. It totally does, and I just think that um, people might have to get comfortable with that. The idea that no, if you do this work and you do it well, and there is no impact or negative impact, that's a result too. And actually, you might find that more valuable than finding out the impact you're having because you can course correct. I think that this idea that it's always good and always going to work is a problem. I think we have to find out where we're failing and find out fast so we can learn from that. And proper measurements the only way to do that. Completion rates, smile sheets will hide that stuff. We need to get those bad results too. And we've both touched on this thing about instructional designers a bit, and they are sort of at the core of creating these things. But I feel like L&D as a function sometimes puts them in a bad position when it comes to this, right? Because you think of, a lot of moving away from sort of the ADDIE model, but the principles are still there. They're still solid. And the first thing about analyze, okay, but are you literally leaving an instructional designer or a team of designers to analyze the business need by themselves on their own? And that's not necessarily their wheelhouse, right? They're going to deal with what they know, what's in front of them. And if they don't know what the business needs, what people need, then what are they going to be able to analyze? And they're only going to analyze around and that's where you're starting that whole process, right? I think there's a disconnect there when we talk about instructional designers that perhaps we're not equipping them with the tools to start with measurement at the beginning. Am I
Yeah.
close?
Yeah. And to your point, I don't know that instructional designers need to be measurement experts or data experts. I do believe that instructional designers need to have data and measurement acumen, right? And I say that as someone whose career started in instructional design. So my career in training, learning, talent development started about 30 years ago. I didn't want to give that away because that makes me sound old, but it's the truth, right? So I have an instructional design perspective, and what I am pretty sure about, David, is that if instructional designers have acumen for measurement and for data analysis and for being focused on business performance, that's going to help inform decisions for instructional design. That's going to inform decisions for impact based design, as I like to call it, right? So, yeah, we shouldn't expect too much from our instructional designers because, they can't be all things to everybody. But again, I think that if you're an instructional designer and you can be just dangerous enough where you have some knowledge of data analysis and you have some knowledge of measurement and some knowledge of impact analytics, then that's just going to help you step up your instructional design game because you'll then have the perspective for being able to design training and learning solutions and experiences with impact in mind. So that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find many roles in an organization that wouldn't benefit from some data acumen, right? These days, I think that's where everything's headed. Data drives just about everything. And yeah, like you said, it isn't that the instructional designer also has to be this top level business liaison or have this deep data scientist background, but an awareness of how these things impact what you're going to be doing and the ability to ask the right questions, right? If you don't know, you don't know. And if you have some of that language in your toolkit, you can start to say, okay, but why? And if you have that question of why, I think as an instructional designer, and somebody can articulate that to you, it could completely change the trajectory of what you're building,
Yeah, and I'll
right?
add to that, David. In addition to acumen with measurement data analytics, I also think that it is to the instructional designer's benefit to wear the hat of performance consultant, right? Because if you are designing to contribute or influence or impact human performance and business performance, then you need a performance mindset and a performance perspective. So it's not always about, how many activities are we going to have in this training and learning experience? What's the duration of the training and learning experience? What are the knowledge checks? I mean, that's all a part of it. But again, if you're doing some of that upfront planning, you're going to put on that performance consultant hat, and you're going to be curious about how what you create is being designed and created in such a way that it can measurably contribute to human and business performance. So, in addition to that acumen for data and measurement, I would also say think about yourself as maybe a performance consultant first and an instructional designer second, because they work together. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the things you're instructionally designing, they're designed to do something, right? And it'd be great to understand what that is from the get go. So you've touched on a couple of cool things here: the performance consultant mindset, right, or even just a performance mindset of getting some of that. A data acumen is there. So there's a couple of skills that. And not just for instructional designers. I think in this we are talking about here clearly works when you start to think about the L&D function as a whole and its place in the organization. So data acumen, performance consulting, are there any other skills that you can think of or even tools that they should start to think about, like, hey, this is going to help us get better at this?
Yeah. I don't know what I'm about to say so much as skill. Maybe it is, but I'm going to say curiosity. Curiosity prompts you to work very differently. Curiosity prevents you from being mundane and habitual. Curiosity leads to discovery, and discovery leads to something new, and discovery leads to you gaining some knowledge or some insight that you might not have otherwise had if you weren't curious. If you're not curious, you tend to kind of stop and just do what you've always done and do it the way you've always done it, right? But I believe curiosity kind of takes you to the next level, particularly as it relates to instructional design, particularly as it relates to performance. So a curious mindset says, I'm really interested in knowing what are the expectations for people in their role day to day versus we need training. That's very different. So if you're curious about the work that people are doing, the performance expectations for those people, then that informs decisions for the kinds of instructional design techniques and methodologies that will heighten performance, that will influence behavior, that will contribute to a business goal. So I think that, maybe that is a skill, curiosity. I don't know. Maybe it's semantics at play here, David, but let's just call it a skill for the sake of this conversation. And so I'm going to say a critical skill is curiosity. Now, in terms of tools, I know we might be a little sick of hearing this, but I'm going to jump on the bandwagon. A tool that I've been experimenting with. Can you guess what it is, David? Can you guess?
I can, and I can't wait to punch my bingo card
Okay.
because I have not had an episode yet. There hasn't been said. I'm going to let you do it. What is
You
it?
already know what it is, man. It's artificial intelligence. And
I knew it. I get it. I'm going to get a free sandwich
well,
here eventually.
I'm on the bandwagon. So I've been working with artificial intelligence and discovering how it supports me in the work that I do. So here's how I think about it, right? So I'm known in the industry as the L&D Detective. So some of our listeners and watchers may remember who Sherlock Holmes is, right? So Sherlock Holmes had an assistant, and that assistant's name was Watson. Now, not the IBM Watson, but the literal
Not
Watson
yet, anyway.
who was helping Sherlock solve his mysteries. So for me, AI is my Watson because I have discovered how artificial intelligence can support and assist me in impact investigation and impact analytics. David, I'm telling you, man, I did something a couple of weeks ago and I was blown away, right? So I wanted to look for trends and some correlations and some causation. And in that work, I was doing something that might have normally taken me, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, just kind of compiling the data, going through the data, getting the data to a point where I can actually reveal some trends and answer some questions. Well, artificial intelligence was able to do that for me in about 6 or 7 minutes, right? So you compare that to the time that it might have taken me to do it. Now, I want to be clear about this because I know there's a lot of conversation and a lot of fear about AI replacing human beings. Well, in the work that I do anyway, I don't see that as happening. What I see for me in impact analytics and measuring the impact of training and learning is that artificial intelligence, AI, is an assistant, literally, that helps me work smarter, not harder. It can't replace what I do, but it can certainly help me be even more efficient and more effective with the work that I do. So, again, to answer your question, man, I think that a tool that is exciting, that can really support impact measurement work is artificial intelligence.
Yeah. That requires at least a somewhat of an understanding of what it is and what it does. And I think that's where people need to start. And I've sort of given up the fight of what AI is and isn't. I think we've just come to a point where all of the things fall under that bucket, and I'm okay with it. I don't need to have that conversation anymore. From the simplest automation now, that's AI, and that's okay. That's fine because I think eventually we're not even going to talk about it anymore because it's just going to be built into what it is that we do, right? I don't think we're going to talk much in the way that we don't talk about the internet as some new tool that we do. It is just going to be the way other things work, right? So I'm all for it. I agree. I think the challenge is to do the work that you're already talking about first, because if you're going to just think, oh, I have this tool that has some algorithms built into it or some AI, and it's going to do is take what you've already been doing and do it faster, maybe more efficiently, but probably not in a new way and probably not offer you some new insights. It's if you're building and creating and delivering learning in a way that is focused on these outcomes we're talking about, that's the kind of data and information that will make the artificial intelligence intelligent.
I like what you
If you're
said.
just feeding, yeah.
What I like about what you said is that, you know, for what I'm about to say is true for me. I don't believe, for the work that I do, I don't believe that artificial intelligence is smarter than I am or knows more than I know. I do believe it helps me work faster. I believe it helps me work smarter, not harder. Right. So I'm not afraid of how AI can support me because, again, I don't believe that it is supreme in all being in its knowledge and what it can do. I think that it supports me in the work that I do, but I don't believe it can replace what I do. It assists me, and so I'm not afraid of it. I'm very clear about what it is and what it is not right now, anyway. And I agree with you that I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 years from now, we're not going to be trying to figure that out because I'm old enough to remember when we were trying to figure out what the internet is and what it's not. I remember when I was in grad school, I'm not going to tell you what year, but I remember when I learned how to use the internet with Netscape. Do you remember Netscape, David?
Mm-hmm.
An old
Yes, we're
browser?
probably. Yep, we're
Yes.
probably neck and neck in the history department here,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. So, it's what's old is new again. We were trying to figure out what the internet is and is not that many years ago. We're doing the same thing right now with artificial intelligence, and we're going to figure that out. And then you know what? After artificial intelligence, something else is going to come along and we're going to be in the same place. But right now, I think that where we are with artificial intelligence, it's amazing. It's exciting. I'm glad to be alive right now because for what I am seeing it can do, I'm literally blown away, man, like all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's the great thing. Like right now, we get blown away by what we see, but the reality of what it's going to be doing is going to be stuff that you don't see and isn't going to be it isn't necessarily going to be like mind blowing, but still amazing, but it'll do it behind the scenes underneath. And yeah, the news stories of, oh, it created this video from scratch, that's fascinating to see. That's where I think people get worried about it. They're like, oh, it's creating things. But for the kind of work we're talking about, you're not necessarily having an AI that's pulling from all the knowledge of humanity, right? Because most will not have that kind of access. It's pulling from whatever it is your particular organization or your world is doing and has done. So you have to think about it that way and say, okay, how do I know that what's going into it is pushing it in the right direction? Because it can only get as smart as you let it. And if you've been doing things not well or your processes have been bad, AI is not going to fix that for you. It's more about, so again, getting on this train of if I am pointing all of my learning in the right direction, I'm focused on the right things, I know how to aim at personal and business impact. Then when AI comes in and starts to do some of that heavy lifting for me, it's all going to the right direction, I think. So Yeah, I'm not afraid of it either. I'm fascinated by it too. I get a little overwhelmed by how much we're beaten in the face with it every day, and I think it's going to lose some of its impact over time.
No pun
Um,
intended. You used the
but
word impact.
I did, didn't I? It happens all the time.
Well, I want to add
Um,
to that, David, by saying that, again, when you think about artificial intelligence and its use, so you think about how I use it as the L&D detective, and I'm using it to analyze data and to discover trends and correlations and causation and all that. Now, I suspect that in other areas, the concern is legitimate, right? Because I'm not creating images with artificial intelligence. There's no risk of me plagiarizing with artificial intelligence because of the work that I do. Um, there's no risk of me, doing anything dangerous with artificial intelligence because I am solely focused on how it can support me with measuring the impact of training and learning. Right. So, for some of those other concerns that are out there about it and how it's being used, I believe those are legitimate concerns, but it's all relative to the context within which you are leveraging and using artificial intelligence. So, and I think that you alluded to that a little bit. So for me, it's exciting. It's helping me be a better L&D detective, but I totally get the concerns that are out there about how artificial intelligence can be misused and compromise, some of the integrity with the way in which we're working now and how artificial intelligence is coming in and kind of changing all of that. But again, for how I'm using it, it is just helping me work smarter, not harder.
yeah, and I think it's just like I said, it's the overwhelming noise of it all that we're conflating things like generative AI that's going to go create a video or an image or write an article versus AI that is simply doing what you're describing, analyzing data much faster and much better than we can. There is a clear delineation, but with all of the noise, the minute you say AI, people start thinking of the latest video they saw where people had like six
Yeah.
fingers and
Or false
you know
information.
false
Yeah.
information, all of those kind of
Yeah.
things. So again, like you said, legitimate concerns, but that's where, I said earlier, like I'm done having the argument about what is and what isn't AI, but it is important to make sure that, you understand the delineation so that when you're working within your organization about, oh, we're going to use this tool to do this or that, you can allay any of those fears. But like, I like to hear that, you're an advocate and using it in a really practical way. Yeah. You were talking about before too. I think you mentioned curiosity, just to even back up a little bit, and I would say, yeah, sure. That doesn't show up on any top critical skills lists. It probably should. I think people think of it as something that's inherent. So maybe the key is making space for people to be curious, right? It's like I think people are curious as in their nature, and I think it's the environment within which you do your work. uh, are you allowed to be curious, right? And I think that's the idea of allowing people, like we were talking about instructional designers, but I think almost anybody in from an L&D perspective to be able to ask why and have it be a real question and not just why in so much as I don't want to do this thing. So you're asking me to do it and I'm going to ask you why simply because I don't want to do it. It's more of, no, I'm going to ask why so that I can do it right and I can get to where we want to be. I think we have to open that up and then also not be reactive when people ask us why, right? Yeah, and not think, just I already figured out why.
Yeah.
It's up for you to
And
do.
some people have had experience with curiosity and pushback, and it kind of prevents them from being curious just because of an experience that they've had when they were curious and they were discouraged from being curious. Where, there are a lot of instances where the answer is that's just the way it is, just do it, right? That discourages curiosity as opposed to asking, why are we doing it that way? And when you ask, why are we doing it that way? I think that leads to, getting answers that help inform decisions that might allow you to deviate from the norm.
Yep. So one of the things I want to touch on is a lot of the reason that companies or L&D professionals are given to do these sorts of things is they talk about, well, if you want that seat at the table, right? If you want to have those strategic discussions, you need to do this. But I've seen, and I want to get your take on this. You tell me if I've just had a unique experience or if you agree with this. But I've talked to many, many learning professionals, and they seem to be I don't know if it's afraid or unwilling to claim ownership of any impact. And what I mean is, when some sort of performance or business outcome is achieved, there's usually more than one thing at play, right? There's a lot of things that went into making that happen. I find that learning professionals will not pound their hand on the table and say, I'm responsible for at least some of that, if not a lot of it. Do you find that?
Well, this is an interesting topic of conversation because I believe to my core that when we talk about contributions to human performance, when we talk about activators for human performance, when we talk about what influences human performance, trust and believe, David, training and learning is one of the things that will do that, but it is not the only thing. Period. In the discussion. I have never seen an instance where training and learning was the only thing that contributed to human performance. I have seen many instances where, in addition to training and learning, there are other variables that contribute to human performance. And some of those things, for example, are kind of simple, like rewards and recognition contributes to human performance. Compensation, all about the Benjamins, pay me, that contributes to performance. Manager support contributes to performance. Technology contributes to performance. Training and learning contributes to performance. So we have to be thinking holistically. Winning is a team sport. And if we're going to win at helping people execute in a way that helps them be successful in the work that they're doing, and ultimately that helps them help the business be successful, we got to keep it real. We got to tell the truth about that. Training and learning is not the only thing that's going to do that. Now, where a lot of organizations struggle and fail, to be quite honest, is this belief that training and learning is the only thing that is needed to trigger or activate human performance. It's just not true. It is not true at all. And if you believe that training and learning by itself is going to contribute to human performance in a way that is measurable, you're headed down the wrong path. So, just in terms of us wanting to own what we own, that whole needing a seat at the table and all that. Yeah, L&D and training needs a seat at the table, but so do the other team players. And when we're all focused together on what ways in which can we individually, from a team perspective, this team, that team, the other team, when we all come together and we are on the same page about doing what it takes to influence and activate human behavior and performance, ultimately business goals, that's when we're going to win. That's when we're going to see success.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think if you do keep it real, like you said, and be honest about it, then your actual portion of impact that you claim is more valid, right? Than just coming out and saying we're responsible for all of it. If you recognize that, and then if you're doing the proper measurement, where you start with the outcomes in the beginning and you do all that, you've got a stronger claim to the impact that you do have, and you've got like a real story to tell. I think that's important. I like that. So that's Kevin M. Yates. That's his message to all of you. Keep it real. Um, so listen, we're coming up on it, but I wanted to do one more thing. So I always do this with my guests. I do prediction time, because spending 15 or plus years in the analyst space, every year your life is full of predictions. I have to make them, I have to read them, and I've often realized that nobody ever goes back and takes a look and says what happened. So I'm going to give you three choices. You can either pick a prediction that has been made and should have already come true, and we can talk about whether or not that did. We can pick a prediction that has been made but has not yet come to fruition, and we can talk about whether or not we think that will happen. Or I will give you the option to make your very own prediction, and we can talk about that a little bit too. So I'm going to leave it to you.
I'll take 3 for 1,000, Alex.
There is no money involved whatsoever or points, but I will let you make your own prediction. We can
Yeah,
talk
so
about it.
my prediction, and we've touched on it a little bit, my prediction is that we are going to be able to do a much better job at producing facts and evidence that illustrates and shows and confirms how training and learning is measurably influencing and contributing to human and business performance with the help of artificial intelligence assisting us in that process and assisting us in being able to do so. And I predict that again because I've just scratched the surface with it. And I'm comparing what I'm able to do now with the help of artificial intelligence and what I was able to do just even a year ago. I am so much more capable with being able to measure the impact of training and learning with the support and help of artificial intelligence than I was a year ago. This time in 23, February 2023. Um, I predict that if we embrace artificial intelligence for impact analytics and impact measurement the way that I have described it today, I think that we're really going to start to move the needle because the needle on being able to do that has been really slow. I think that the needle is going to move a lot faster when we're able to harness and leverage the power and the purpose of artificial intelligence in ways that help us definitively say, as a result of training and learning, we are able to attribute training and learning's contribution this way, specifically that way. And here's how training and learning is, again, helping people execute in their roles, in their work, in their jobs in ways that are measurable and ways in which we can actually see the result from the training and learning experiences that they've had. So that's my prediction. That's my prediction. So play this 5 years from now. Let's see if I was right.
Yeah, I don't think I can argue with it on that. I don't think you're wrong. As much as I would love to have more of a debate on it, I think you're right. I mean, look, you're doing it, so you come from a place of you're not guessing, you're not prognosticating, you're doing it, and you can see where the future is taking us. I think you're right. I think the key is, we talk about the hard work, right? This whole thing has been about hard work. If there are ways to alleviate some of that hard work, which, let's face it, data analysis in and of itself is hard work, and a lot of L&D teams don't necessarily have the skills
Or the
for that,
interest,
really.
the skills of the interest. Yeah.
Well, yes, exactly, yeah. And so then you take that, and plus there's this sort of esoteric element to what we do, right? The stuff that we do isn't all ones and zeros, it isn't all numbers, and so to analyze that is even harder work for a human. Whereas now, artificial intelligence, to me, it takes this idea of data analysis, which was very binary like this. And now you can include these more subjective elements, and you can actually have a faster, more efficient return on that. Like the ability of an AI to look at a document or data or a series of things and come back with sentiment, overall feelings about things, trends that it's seeing that you wouldn't be able to pick up unless you were scouring this stuff for a really long time. I think that's really the possibilities, right? So you can now tie the hard number stuff with the touchy-feely impact behavior stuff and actually come out with some real outcomes. I think that's fascinating. I can't wait.
Amazing, and I'm here for it.
Well, you're already
Yeah,
there
yeah,
for it. You're
yeah.
doing it. So I look forward to hearing more about how that journey goes and just the different ways which you're leveraging the tool. Because a lot of the times I talk about this stuff, it's really just talking about it. I like to hear when it's being done and being used for real practical purposes. So that's pretty cool. I think people, if they would want to know more about that, they should reach out to you to find out how to do that. Because that's, I think, once you get done talking about how cool it is, that's the next thing. Is, well, cool, how do I use it? What
Yeah,
do I do?
yeah, man. Reach out.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mr. Yates, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this with me. That's my favorite thing about this podcast is to have conversations with people in real life and say, you know what? I bet other people might want to sit in and listen to the things that we're talking about. So I'm glad you were able to do this. I really appreciate it. And maybe we'll follow up again in a year and see where the AI journey is
That would
taking
be
you.
so cool. Let's see how close to right my prediction is. Let's meet here, as we used to say. What in the '80s? Same bat time, same bat channel.
Sure. You got it. Thanks
Take
again.
care.